Welcome, folks, to the Successgineering Your Life Lab. We are welcoming my very special guest here, Sheena Grobb. That was just a little clip from her video, The Breakless Heart. And Sheena, I think right now you are in Winnipeg. Is that correct?
It is correct.
It
Yes.
is. Okay, about to start traveling the world again. But Sheena, I met through the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and I was running an event at our national convention about a year and a half ago, and we Sheena was brand new to CAPS. The universe brought her there in the most wonderful way, and she was. When she got up on stage and performed at the special event that we had during the convention, I mean, you could hear a pin drop in the audience in terms of wow, the emotion, the power in her voice. And Sheena is not just a singer, but a speaker as well, because she's been on a very powerful journey. And Sheena, perhaps you'd like to share a little bit more about your journey in terms of where you've come from and where you see yourself heading.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Ravi. This is really special for me, seeing as how we met on that really special weekend. So a little bit about myself. I've been a musician and a singer, a songwriter, pretty much since I was 2 years old. My mom was a music teacher, so I was privileged to have an opportunity to explore music really early. And I wrote my first songs at 10 years old, so it was something very natural for me. And after I finished a university degree in my early 20s, I pursued my music out of the sheer will of knowing that it was something I needed to do and needed to express.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so inherent in me. And I have been very fulfilled in that career. Expressing music has been a wonderful part of my journey, my purpose. But in the last number of years, I've also realized that a speaking opportunity, a chance to share more deliberately and consciously with my community, and also those looking for a little bit of connection with what I've gone through. I have a visitor here, sorry.
That's okay.
I realized that it was time to start telling the depths of my story, which included a diagnosis with MS at 16 years old. So that was probably the beginning of a huge turning point in my life, quite young. And it wasn't something I was prepared to talk about until 16 years later in my life. And I had to explore why that was. I needed some time to understand what this element of my journey really meant for me. And it's been one of the most fulfilling aspects of my life to share in that struggle, because also the most incredible unfoldings, successes, connections to my higher being, all of those things evolved after I came to terms with it. So my speaking goes hand in hand with my music, and it always has, but I think now I'm taking a new step in that direction.
Right. And the just going to do something. To get that diagnosis at 16, my God, that must have been quite the experience. And I can totally understand where it took you some time to, as you say, to come to terms with that and to digest that. And I know you and I have had some wonderful conversations about the insights and the learnings that have come out of that. So what I'm wondering is if you would think now of the learnings, the things you share, the stories in your speaking, if you were to think of three things, this show is about how do you success-engineer your life. And if you could think of three things that would you might be able to offer to the viewers in terms of what you have learned through this process about how to value life, how to treasure it, and then how to make it more of what you truly, truly want? I'm wondering what three things might bubble up for you.
Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing that pops into my mind, and something I learned during some of the more challenging times of my health journey, when I was experiencing paralysis and loss of vision, I realized that focusing on what I could still do and being mindful and grateful of everything that was still completely healthy and vibrant and possible in my world, continuing to focus and be grateful for that was a huge lesson in those moments of challenge, when all I wanted to do was just collapse into the experience and be taken over with sadness, grief. I learned that there was always something brighter that I could be focusing on, and it would lift me. It would change my experience entirely. So number one for me was experiencing and learning about gratitude. And I know people have talked about that in my world for many, many years, and I never quite got it until I was faced with such a significant challenge in my own life. And secondly, I would say that giving my body, my heart, a chance to really express what's really going on for me was important too. Because I know for a lot of us, especially those seeking, success to a new level, many of us are very positive people, and we're already inspired. We're already feeling really good about life in some ways. I also noticed that there were other parts of me that were experiencing sadness or difficulty that sometimes I just needed to give space for. And that actually helped me become more authentic in a positive experience once I just gave it the space and time for whatever was kind of sitting in the back burner of my consciousness. And then I would say a third point, when I started to think about other people, when I started to really sit and give my thoughts and my energy to what someone else in my life was going through on a regular basis, I noticed that it significantly shifted my own perspective of my life and what my life was about. And every day started to change when I began a practice of considering someone else. So I don't know, that's the first three things that pop into my mind.
So you're right that let me go back to the first thing first. I've got a couple of questions around that. When you talk about gratitude, I mean, yes, we do hear it from others, from a lot of people about why that's important. The thing I'm really touched by is how when you talk about the extremes that you were going through, that you were still able to do that. Can you share a bit of your journey of how you were able to learn to pull yourself out of all the, it sounds like what you were dealing with is very easy to sink into sort of a quagmire of that, how you were able to pull yourself out of that to actually see what you're grateful for?
Well, to be most honest, I spent many years not being able to. And I think that was a part of me arriving at where I did, because for a long time, I would try to be grateful, and I would try to practice those things that others claimed, would lead to relief for me. And my honest experience was just of utter heartbreak and just devastation or anger or sadness or whatever it was that accompanied some of these challenges that I wasn't used to facing. And so I wouldn't say that I just found a secret potion and all of a sudden woke up to it. But I think that that's possible now. Like, I see that some of the years I spent really suffering within myself and not always sharing that, not always bringing other people into that, And many of us don't. Many of us don't feel like that's appropriate or has any place in our life. And that's understandable for some. I just found that as I practiced honoring what I was authentically experiencing and stopped resisting it and started to just love the part of myself that was suffering and started to love the part of myself that was falling apart. Yeah. And as I did that, as I just practiced that love, my whole body relaxed and I became okay. And it was just this really beautiful experience of, what it must feel like to kind of go through a dark moment, but then naturally arrive at the brightness on the other side of it when you allowed it to happen.
So there's a couple of things in there that I hear. One is, it took time, and I think what a lot of people do is they beat themselves up if they don't get things right away. So it's a matter of being gentle with yourself. There's Absolutely. Also, I guess what I'd like to find out is if we can sort of slow down for you. That you said that it was a practice that you kept practicing. So a lot of people talk about meditation and this and that. They are practices, means you're always practicing. You don't get there. But what was it that kept you going? Because it sounds like it took quite a bit of time. What was it that kept you going? What was it inside that said there's something here, even though it wasn't working out for so long?
I think that I was experiencing natural relief that no one could have described to me except as I experienced it. I started to just feel more alive, even as I allowed myself to feel my sadnesses and stopped resisting, stopped fighting, to be what I should be in that moment, and to be what the image that I wanted to portray to the world. I had this idea of what I should be, and I wanted to be that already, and that was actually working against what I needed in that moment. And so I did learn certain tools as well. I should make note of the fact that I had this is part of what my TED Talk was about. I had a great privilege of working with Dr. Doug Tatarin, who has developed the biomotor framework. And he has developed a way, a set of tools, let's say, to articulate and guide through our emotional experience. So for me, just having something to hold on to in those moments when I felt so lost or I felt so overwhelmed with sadness and grief, having words or practice that could guide me through that was very helpful and very, in my world, something I feel we all should have, tools we all should have to know what we're even feeling.
That was really your second point about listening to your body, and I wanted to go if you could go into a little bit more about that, like hearing and what I'm hearing also in their threads of, like, one of my favorite authors, probably my favorite personal growth author is Eckhart Tolle, and about the power of now. It's about being present with where you are, even if it's ooky and gucky, just to be present and let it flow. It will flow through, right? And so can you share more about that process that you went? It sounds like there was a lot of presencing there and being within listening to your body.
Yes. Yeah. Well, for one, I think that I was learning how to differentiate between the different emotions. So there's a difference in my body between feeling lost compared to feeling alone, compared to feeling inadequate or insignificant. And I learned how to notice when my body was holding onto a feeling, that brick in my stomach that I would feel sometimes when I was upset or nervous or scared. it would sit like a brick in my stomach, really. And that's as far as it went. Sometimes I would notice it more or less. Sometimes it would present itself, more significantly or not. But until I learned how to sit with that feeling and let it digest itself and come out through this series of practice, this framework, this Netter framework that Dr. Tatarin taught me, until I learned that, it was kind of like I was just kind of blind to my own experience. And he describes it like expecting a first-year hockey player to reach the NHL in the first year. Like, that's just not going to happen if you haven't had the tools and the experience and practice. Like, it's kind of impossible. So I started to learn about myself, and I realized that as I expressed, like, I'm a singer, so I've always been expressing. I've always been writing songs that would share what I'm feeling. I didn't always realize that there were core emotions in me that were activating those songs. And so the more conscious I became about my experience, the more useful it was for me to release it and let it go and change the feeling. So quite powerful.
Well, and it's quite physically powerful, I would say, in that, basically you talked about how badly the symptoms hit when you were 16.
Yeah.
And you're not showing any of those symptoms now. So it's a complete reversal. And if I'm understanding right, it was not from medication, it was from these internal practices, correct?
I will say that my experience with MS is that everybody who has this diagnosis experiences it differently. And there are holistic supports, and medication at different points along the way for me has been used, and other points it hasn't.
Okay.
But there is a stress component that is scientifically proven to impact those with MS. And for me, I realized that my stress had so much to do with the emotional helplessness that I was experiencing that I just didn't know what to do with.
Yeah.
I had, like, basically, I'm upset, and that's all I knew how to understand, how to articulate. And so, yeah, like, the more I've learned to just honor my body and take time to experience what I'm really going through, I haven't had any symptoms. And I'm not a doctor. I can't say that I know for certain that is the reason I'm as healthy as I am today. Like, I know that I practice a raw food diet, and I look after myself. I get enough rest. I listen to my doctors. But this practice of learning to consciously cry when I'm sad and be present to my body, I just know in my heart that has had the biggest impact on me.
Well, I mean, I can speak as someone who's been around you. There are people you come into contact with that have this sense of peace or presence, and it just shifts the room. And I know that whenever I'm around you, there's just you have that. It's very rare that you find someone who is so at peace that it exudes and others feel it. And that's just in conversation. But when you sing, I mean, literally, I've seen it 2 or 3 times now live, and you capture a room of hundreds. Like, everyone is there with you, and it's remarkable when you talk about being able to release the stress. I can see those effects of it with you.
100%. What started out as being more of a what started out as being more of a like something to aid my physical ailments, I started to learn and see and watch it affect my performances and how I interacted with people. My ability to let go of every fear while I'm on stage allowed me to just be present to an audience of hundreds as if I was just playing alone in my living room. And part of that was that I was able to work through some of the feelings of insignificance I would often feel before going on stage. I would always fear forgetting a word, or I would fear making a mistake. And I actually, before even going on stage now, I'm able to process that emotion so that even if it were to happen, it wouldn't be as big a deal.
Yeah.
And it freed me to be present to my listeners and to really give what I was there to give. And I'm watching it in my life all the time, just become more and more impactful on those who are listening.
You know, it's funny when you, when you say that. I remember once seeing, I'm just looking up uh, to McCartney, Paul McCartney. There was an unplugged performance that McCartney did, and he forgot the words to one of his classic songs. I forget what, I think it was Hey Jude. He was singing Hey Jude, and he was there, and I don't know what comes next.
Happens. It
Yeah,
happens.
it happens, and he just flowed with it, right? So what's the big deal if you know? But yet we make such a huge thing in our heads. I mean, it's, think about it. You do it with your singing, and that's, it seems high profile, but how much do people paralyze themselves because they're afraid of something that could go wrong in whatever it is they're doing?
And I think my understanding of where this stems from is, likely impressions we took in as children. That if if we experienced feeling not good enough, or that something wasn't quite what was expected of us, or whatever, we took in impressions that, oh my gosh, like I need to be perfect, or I need to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And we are overwhelmed with these feelings of inadequacy. I think that the core feeling that I realized in a lot of my performances was coming from inadequacy and just being afraid that I wasn't going to be good enough.
And, and I think that's something that paralyzes many people.
Yeah, it does. We have a visitor. This is Jelly.
Hey.
Honestly, Ravi, there's some people that will never try, even when they know there is an internal flame, some divine purpose within them. Some people will never try. They'll spend their lives missing those opportunities to try because they're just overwhelmed with the fear of what happens if it goes wrong, or what happens if I screw up, or what will people think, or what. And honestly, one of the biggest gifts that comes from going through a diagnosis like MS, where I had to literally process, I'm dedicating my life to the subtle nuances of my fingers, and that's not very practical. And what happens if? What happens when? And I believe that is just maybe a more extreme example of what we all face on some level. And I'm just really inspired to help people overcome whatever it is that's holding them back. And I still go through it every day. Every day it's a choice. Every day I have to choose to experience the feelings that comes along with doing what I do.
Well, it's funny. I'm just going to hang on. I just finished a blog post. There's an article I go back to every year or two, which I really like, called, it's talking about, do you make a decision just because you go yeah, or because you go hell yeah, right? And the thing I was writing about is, do we choose a life of hell yeah or meh? And I think a lot of people settle for meh because they're afraid of what could go wrong, or with the hell yeah, or what could happen if it's back to that Marianne Williamson quote, I think, about where our greatest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure.
Absolutely. And my belief is that hell yeah is at the core of all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Us has that. When we're in the state of meh, like that we don't want to allow that to flow, that there's actually something suppressing it. There's something covering that spark. And in my experience, one of the ways of exposing that spark is to reveal to ourselves what's blocking us. And maybe that's not what everybody needs. Like maybe some people can choose to just reveal their spark by making up their mind to, and they're lucky. They can do that. I mean, that's a wonderful practice. I practice that thinking a lot. I think it's really important for balance, and it lifts you if you can just surround yourself with people who are also living in that state of mind. We affect each other.
Absolutely.
And so for me, I guess the nuance of that message for me is that for those of us who have experienced debilitating fear with real evidence that it can happen, and real consequences if things were to go wrong, for those of us who've experienced that and have been faced with a challenge that feels bigger than us, I think that allowing and learning some tools to express that and break that up a little bit can be helpful. And that's one of the lessons I learned from this experience with MS, whatever this has been. It's been an interesting one.
Well, and that sort of brings us, because we just need to start wrapping up here. What I'd like to do is ask now, if people want to find out more about you, it's sheenagrobb.com.
Yes.
And also to hunt you up on YouTube, they can find you.
My YouTube channel has lots of videos and music that I've done over the years. And I'm beginning to speak more, just like we're speaking right now, about my actual experience. So following me on Facebook would be a good idea too.
And Facebook as well. And the other thing is this process that you went through about learning to connect with your feelings and so on. Are there any links or resources you can provide to people to look that up?
If there is a link on my website for Dr. Doug Tatarn's Biomotive Framework. He also has DVDs available because he's kind of at the exit of his own career, and so he wanted to get some of these things on DVD. So people can look into that as well. Very, very helpful.
So they can link to that through your website?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Sheena, this has been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much. This was my pleasure.
Yeah, it's always a delight. And I'm just gonna wrap this up for a sec here. So folks, this is the end of this show. We will be back next week and each Friday with someone new to share with you some of their life hacks and ways to success-engineer your life. We wish you a great weekend, an amazing week. Sheena, thank you again so very much for joining me.
Thank you, Ravi.
And we will be talking with you very, very soon.